Good morning, everyone. Buenos dias. I have the privilege of introducing our keynote speaker this morning, Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan. As you all know, Secretary Duncan is our 9th U.S. Secretary of Education, and under his leadership, he has spearheaded numerous innovative and creative initiatives at the department, such as Race to the Top. He set the tone for his tenure during his confirmation hearings when he called education, quote, the most pressing problem, the most pressing issue facing America today, and added that preparing young people for success is not just a moral obligation, but an economic imperative. I've had the opportunity personally to work directly with Secretary Duncan and his team on our Univision National Education Initiative that's focused on the Hispanic community, and I can tell you from seeing this firsthand that the passion for education reform, particularly with minority communities, is something that is in Arne Duncan's DNA. You know, prior to his current position from 2001 to 2008, he was the CEO of Chicago Public Schools, and while there, he won high praise from many for bringing reform leaders together, principals, teachers, and business leaders behind an aggressive reform agenda. A native of Chicago, a graduate of Harvard University, and a former professional basketball player that rumor says he can still hold his own on the court. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving a warm welcome to our Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Caesar, for that kind introduction to the many friends here and governors. Thank you for your leadership. I want much rather have a conversation than a long lecture, so I'll just say a couple things and look forward to your questions. And obviously, when I said yes to this invitation, I didn't know if we would still, still have a job or not. So I'm thrilled to have the chance to keep doing this work with many of you, hopefully for the next 4 years. It's just an amazing, amazing opportunity that a few years ago I couldn't have begun to dream possible. But just to sort of let you know what I'm thinking about, and obviously a time over the next couple months to really try and think about what we want to do over the next 4 years. And I'm challenging my team to try and be extraordinarily ambitious. And we've made some progress over the past 4 years, but we know as we look across the country at a high school dropout rate that's 25%, at a college graduation rate where we're 14th in the world, at as many as 2 million high-wage, high-skilled jobs today in this country in tough economic times that go unfilled. This is not a time to be resting on our laurels or congratulating ourselves. We have so much unfinished business, and that's why all of you are in this room. So how do we think about that? Where do we try and go as we move forward? A couple different areas I'll just walk through quickly. I've been thrilled the past couple years to focus on early childhood education. I think that's arguably the best investment we can make. We want to continue to try and stay the course there. I'm just tired at every level in education that we're constantly playing catch up. I keep saying we have to get out of the catch up business. And the best way I can think for us to get out of the catch up business is to have our 5-year-olds entering kindergarten ready to succeed, ready to read with their literacy and socialization skills intact. And we want to continue to work very, very hard to create more opportunities there, particularly in disadvantaged communities where too many of our children come to kindergarten today not knowing the front of the book from the back of the book. That presents just an extraordinary challenge to the best of kindergarten teachers, and that reality has to change. On the K-12 side, obviously we've seen an amazing amount of reform, but everyone here knows these next couple years are years of huge challenge. The idea of implementing higher standards, the adoption of 46 states of higher standards is clearly a huge step in the right direction. That's the easy part. How we teach those higher standards, how we help teachers and principals in the community and parents, and most importantly, students themselves, understand what it takes to hit that higher bar. How do political leaders have the courage when their test scores drop 20, 30, 40, 50%, and we stop lying to children, we tell the truth? Will they have the courage not to backpedal and dummy down standards, as so many political leaders did under No Child Left Behind? We have to work very hard on that. As we move forward with teacher and principal evaluation and support that is meaningful, and it takes into account for the first time, maybe in decades, actual student achievement. Do we have the courage to stay the course there? So we think through the next generation of assessments. I know you had a presentation, I think, yesterday on the 2 consortia states working so hard on that. All these things are great, but the confluence of them over the next couple of years, let me promise you, is going to be hard and choppy and difficult. And we can either choose to sort of backpedal and run from those challenges and run from things when they're not exactly perfect, or we can stay the course. If we stay the course, 3-4 years from now, I think we would have moved our country forward in just an absolutely remarkable direction. But we do run a risk for a whole host of reasons of backpedaling. If we lose this moment of opportunity, I don't know when we get it back again. We'll have to think through together how we make sure we have the courage to do the right thing there. I also continue to challenge myself to think about how we attract and retain great talent into education. We know we have the baby boomers retiring. The need for great talent has never been greater. There's nothing more important than getting a great teacher into every classroom, a great principal into every school. But it's really interesting to me as we all talk about the achievement gap, as I look across 15,000 school districts in this country. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. We do not have one school district that I'm aware of that systemically identifies their highest performers, their best principals, the hardest working teachers, and systemically puts them with the most underserved children. And in fact, we have so many disincentives for the greatest talent to go to where the greatest need is. And I'm sort of tired of talking about the achievement gap, and I continue to talk now about the opportunity gap. And I just think as a country, for all of our seeming intent or seeming courage, we have been spectacularly uncourageous in this effort. And if we're serious about closing achievement gaps, we have to close the opportunity gap. And I'm looking for a series of, ideally states, but maybe start at the district level, who are on a systemic level going to find their hardest working, their most committed human capital, their talent, and place it with the children who need the most help. There are a couple places that are tinkering with this around the edges, but the fact that we don't have one that is doing this out of 15,000 shows to me that, again, we're not even in the game. We're not there yet, and need to continue to think very hard about that. And then finally, all of this is to what end? The president has challenged me, and I hold myself accountable, to help us lead the world again in college graduation rates. And the fact that we're 14th should be something that is just absolutely unacceptable to all of us. And we have to make sure college continues to be accessible and affordable. Probably many of you in this room are struggling to pay for college, and when I'm on our airplane yesterday, or whether I'm in the dry cleaners of the grocery store, I can't tell you how many not just disadvantaged families, but middle-class families come up, and the cost of college is just crushing them. And how we make that dream of going to college more accessible, more affordable for folks who are working hard and doing all the right things. We've taken some significant steps with a $40 billion increase in Pell Grants, but we have not begun to solve this problem. How we work on access and affordability, not just on the front end, how we work on completion rates. The goal is not to go to college, the goal is to graduate at the back end. Attainment rates are nowhere near where we need to be. How we push on that very hard. And then finally, how we think about community colleges, which I think are just such a huge part of the solution here. And as folks retrain and retool for the new economy, green energy jobs and IT jobs and healthcare jobs and advanced manufacturing jobs, we want to continue to shine a spotlight on the great work that community colleges can do to help families and communities and ultimately the country get back on its feet. So an ambitious agenda, a long way to go, but I just so appreciate the bipartisan leadership of folks coming together. I continue to say we have to put politics and ideology to the side. I see great leadership coming from the states and things like the waivers and other opportunities. My hope is that Congress will start to work in a more bipartisan way and getting through the fiscal cliff, not having sequestration happen, thinking about reauthorizing No Child Left Behind together. If folks want to come together, I can't think of a better area to work on than education. I think it's clearly in Congress's self-interest to do something in a very different way, and we hope that opportunity comes. But the real work is always going to come at the local level, in communities, in districts and states. Your leadership is hugely important, and please hold me and my team accountable for being a great partner as we try and help lead the country where we need to go. Thank you so much. I'll stop there. I'm happy to take some questions.
Hi, I'm Andy Rotherham. I was asked to come up and ask the Secretary a couple of questions and then open up the audience. So I think I'll start with the obvious one that everyone wants to know. We all read Tom Friedman, so that was an interesting education agenda. But what are your plans as Secretary of State?
That was Tom Friedman this morning. Last week, The Onion said I was going to become a male stripper, so I don't know which one's more accurate. The Onion's probably more accurate than Tom Friedman, but no, I've clearly more than enough to keep me busy and occupied. I would love to have the opportunity to keep doing the job I currently have.
Well, you alluded to something, and you said, politics is going to get more treacherous, these things. I want to talk about that more directly, because, traditionally, and this is an interesting conference for it, the center on education has not really held. over time. It didn't hold for the first President Bush. It didn't hold for President Clinton when he proposed some of these things. We've always had to walk them back, and we've seen what's happened with No Child Left Behind and the second President Bush. You know, we look up, we get to this accountability cliff, we look over it, and we tend to back away. No Child Left Behind said 40% of schools in the country need to do better, and people said, whoa, that's a lot, maybe that's too many. So looking ahead at the politics, it's a second term, and so there's politics associated with that. There's a midterm election. Reform didn't have a great night on election night this year. There was some pushback on a number of initiatives supported by many people in this room. Politically, like, what's going to make it different this time that we're not going to sort of see history repeat itself?
Well, I'm actually extraordinarily hopeful, and I don't think it's a naive hope, and some might argue that it is. But when I look at what states, again, Congress has been a little more difficult. When I look at what states and governors and local legislative leaders and state school chief officers, what they have done over the past couple years, Andy, no one predicted that would happen. No one predicted that 46 states would adopt higher standards. No one would have predicted that three dozen states have taken teacher evaluation and principal support to a very different level. No one would have predicted that we have 44 states working on the next generation of assessments. And the fact, frankly, that we've had almost no rollback there. And honestly, if a couple states choose to roll back, that would not be the end of the world. I mean, the media would find that fascinating. But to look at where we were 3 or 4 years ago compared to today, I have seen amazing courage, amazing leadership at the state level, and that makes me hopeful about where we can go.
So Cesar introduced you. This election, I think one of the big things that came out of it, obviously, if you look at the demographics of the electorate, is the Republican Party is struggling mightily with Hispanic voters and is in some ways going the wrong way. Substantively, education struggles with Hispanic youth. The outcomes are dreadful, particularly for kids who English isn't their first language or immigrant children, but overall, enormous achievement gaps. In the second term specifically, as this issue tends, I think, fortunately and thankfully, is going to move more to the forefront, what are the kinds of things you're thinking about for this group of students?
So a couple things. Obviously, I think there's a moment of opportunity on both sides, and again, some soul searching on maybe more on the Republican side that we have to do something around immigration reform. And of all the things I'm proud of, one of my biggest disappointments from the first 4 years is that we didn't get the DREAM Act passed. I just think we are absolutely crazy on that as a country. And the fact that we allow so many children who have worked so hard and played by the rules and gotten great grades and been community leaders, the fact that we slam shut the door of opportunity is absolutely insane. And this isn't the right thing just to do for the Hispanic community. This is the right thing to do for our country. These are the future leaders, job creators, entrepreneurs, innovators. And so I think there is a moment of opportunity literally now, in these next couple months, for Congress to do the right thing. And if that happens, clearly the upside there is just absolutely extraordinary. The other thing you may not know of, just in the past 2 years, we've seen a 25% increase in Hispanic enrollment in college. That is a huge jump. Now we got to make sure, again, it's not just enrollment, it's graduation rates at the back end. But I think there's a growing awareness. The college going rates are up, high school dropout rates are down, high school graduation rates are up. Long way to go. Cesar and others have provided great leadership here. But again, there's a lot to be hopeful about, a lot to be optimistic about, and I think we have an opportunity together with the DREAM Act, something like the DREAM Act passing, to transform educational opportunity for the community.
Terrific. I know we have some questions from the audience, so the mic runners will start to come around. So quick lightning round question. Mr. Secretary, there's been a lot of talk about social mobility. Governor Bush gave a speech yesterday. More precisely, I would say the lack thereof, the profound lack thereof that we have. Just very specifically, lots of views ascribed to you on how you think about this and so forth. In your own words, just very briefly, what's the role specifically, not all the other factors involved in poverty, which is very complicated, mobility, but schools specifically, what's the role that elementary and secondary schools play in this problem of income inequality and social mobility?
Well, obviously, as you know, I've spent my entire life working in the inner city in one of the poorest neighborhoods in Chicago. And what I've seen from the time I was a baby growing up as a part of my mother's program was the only way to break cycles of poverty is through educational opportunity. And I'm convinced, and not everyone will agree with me, that as a country, the dividing line to me is less around race and class than it is around educational opportunity. And you give me the poorest kid from the most violent neighborhood and the toughest family, put them in a great early childhood program, put them in an elementary school where they can take algebra in 8th grade and where they're great teachers, put them in a high school where they're getting this support academically and socially to think about going to college. And I'm actually really optimistic about that young person's future. Put that same child in a school with a 60% dropout rate and have them enter kindergarten never having seen a book, that we're just perpetuating the problem. So there's nothing more important we can do than provide great educational opportunities. And I'll always be the first to say, We got to feed children. We have to give them eyeglasses. We have to take care of their physical and social and emotional health. And a great teacher can't do this by themselves, but you can't get this success without great schools. It is absolutely fundamental, critical to helping break cycles of poverty and social failure.
All right, let's bring in some questions. And we'd ask, so we can get to a few questions, to keep them more in the traditional sort of interrogative sense of the question rather than the often Washington style of the more expository.
Mr. Secretary, how are you?
Great to see you, Mike.
Good to see you. I just wanted to report, as state superintendent in Michigan, I go to conferences and people treat you nice, but I want to say that being here yesterday, starting with Governor Bush, everyone praised you, even when you weren't here. It was really good to see. And by the way, so you don't get too big ahead, this basketball thing, I actually saw Justin Bieber in the celebrity game score on you, so this is it. But can I ask...
All right, Mike, we told the Secretary there'd be no really hard questions, so I'd ask you to please honor that.
Okay, so the specific question, we have a lot of discussion yesterday about the schools of education and how they can help us get better teachers. Do you have specific leverage points that you plan to use in the second term to that end?
Yeah, and it's an area where, again, I would give me and my team a low grade on the first term, and we've talked about it. We haven't done enough. But without getting too specific, there are a number of things that we are planning to do. At the end of the day, schools of education, not all, but many have been a part of the problem. And when I talk to great young teachers, the lack of actual classroom teaching experience, lots of theory of education, psychology of education, history of education, not enough actual education in diverse school settings, and then the lack of technology. And all these great young teachers are using formative assessments and figuring it out, but they're learning that on the job. They're asking, why aren't they learning that when they're in school? So we need to push very, very hard with schools of ed. And just as we've had charter schools and other things to create innovation on the K-12 side, we need to look at alternative modes of teacher training as well to create some competitive pressure there as well. So that's part of a litany of unfinished business that we need to take very, very seriously.
Yes, ma'am, in the back. I saw a hand and a mic in the back. Here we go.
Thank you, Secretary. Again, I'd like to say really appreciate your commitment to providing great teachers for kids who are in underperforming schools and underperforming populations. I would like to ask you, though, as well, I hear so often, as we talk about being a leader in innovation in the next century, I've heard folks say in different settings from time to time that the high-performing kids will kind of take care of themselves, and that we don't need to focus as much on them. I would submit if we're going to be great as a nation in the next century, both in innovation and otherwise, we need to have a strategy around the Thomas Jeffersons and the Bill Gates of the world to make sure that the top performing kids are really being challenged to be all they can be as well. Is there a focus within your department in any way on those top performing kids to really kind of take them to the next level as well, so that we're focusing not just on the poor performing kids, not just on raising the center from a 1,000 SAT to a 1,200 SAT, but those top kids as well, making them be all they can be?
Yeah. These are all great questions that deserve longer answers, but I think part of what so disturbed me under the traditional accountability and No Child Left Behind is there was a focus on that proficiency cut score right in the middle. So there's lots of incentives to work with those 5% of kids around the middle to try and bump them over that bar and look like you were doing something, and no incentives to help those kids at the top or at the bottom. So for me, it's not about the top or the bottom in the middle, it's about all kids. And for me, I want to look at growth and gain. How much are kids improving? Again, what we see coming from states to the waiver process is pretty extraordinary. So whether it's that extraordinarily gifted child, or whether it's that child in the middle, or whether it's that child with special needs, I want to know how much those children are improving each year. And where you incentivize teachers and schools and districts and ultimately states to be accountable for the growth, for the improvement of every single child, then I think you get away from the disincentives that I think the federal law put in place. So it's not for me about targeting any one population, but it's saying that in any class, in any school, you have that whole spectrum. We have to get away from focusing on a small number. We have to figure out how we're individualizing, how we're personalizing instruction with great teachers, with technology, with a whole set of things during the school day and after school to make sure that children are reaching their academic and social potential. The thing, a little bit off topic, I just want to add that Paul Tuff's work on the non-cognitive skills I just think is hugely important as well. And it's not just about the academic piece of this. And I think so much about the kids I worked with growing up, that academic part was important, but the resiliency and the grit and the determination and the ability to overcome obstacles is something I think all of us have to take much more seriously, and it's hugely important if we're serious about having kids achieve things that no one in their family has ever done before.
Let me ask a quick follow-up on that before we go to another question. So we're talking about progress and growth, but the assessment consortia are wrestling with what those are going to look like. Very specifically, will you consider it a failure if the assessment consortia don't come up with a common cut score that all states that are participating use on those assessments? Will you consider that a failure of that initiative?
I think you need to, again, they have some work to do, and we want to support them in being successful in getting across the finish line. And obviously, part of the reason we funded 2 rather than 1 was to create some competition between states and sort of see what makes sense. So this thing will play for a couple years, and it would have been easier for us to fund 1, but we didn't think anyone necessarily had a perfect answer. But I think to have comparability between the 2 so that we can have those honest conversations is going to be an important piece of the puzzle. But again, that's just one piece. I don't want to oversimplify the thing.
Yes, ma'am.
Senator Jane Cunningham from Missouri, thank you so much, Secretary, for the reforms that you have brought and the way you've challenged states to meet those reforms. Last night we heard from Condoleezza Rice and Joel Klein, and they gave us a report on their report on from the Council on Foreign Relations. And they told us that we are at a stage as far as national security risk because of education that we can't have an evolution of education and wait for us to get where we need to be with improvement, but that we really need to do it very, very quickly like a revolution. They got the question, if you could do one thing to reach that revolution, to get the improvement that we need right away to deal with the national security risk, what would it be? They both had the same answer, choice and competition, including all options, open enrollment, charters, non-public schools. And I guess I ask you that, what you would recommend and how you all might be challenging the states to open those options. In Missouri, we have 2 districts, more than that, but at least 2 big ones, Kansas City and St. Louis, that are highly underperforming. And the public school districts around them, especially in the St. Louis area, will not accept those children and give them an opportunity like you had talked about. Yet our parochial schools in the St. Louis area would open their doors wide and welcome.
Okay, I want to make sure we can get to, so Arne, let's, Mr. Secretary, answer this specifically, the question on choice, or the one thing.
So I always sort of push back against the one thing because I think part of our challenge in education is we've looked for silver bullets. This is really hard, complex work, so I always want to go back to early childhood opportunity and K-12 reform and higher ed. But if there's one thing, and again, I don't want to, I don't think there's one thing. When I look at the highest performing countries across the globe, Singapore and South Korea and Finland, what they have in common is that 100% of their teachers come from the top third of their graduating classes. In several of those countries, 100% of their teachers come from the top 10% of their graduating classes. So 90% of folks who want to enter education don't have the opportunity. Today, 2/3 of our teachers come from the bottom third of their graduating classes. And we talk about 1 million teachers retiring, 1/3 of the workforce. The opportunity for us to attract and retain great talent now is going to change public education for the next 30 years. It's a once-in-a-generation opportunity. And so if there's one thing I could do, it's how we elevate and strengthen the teaching profession. We've talked a lot about this Respect initiative. There's a lot of information on our website. But that's maybe the biggest gift that we could give to this country.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Yes, sir.
Superintendent John Huppenthal from Arizona. Secretary, can you talk about your performance pay initiatives and what successes you see there and what challenges you see there?
Yeah, and again, so I have to be really clear, there's no silver bullet, so I don't want to act like merit pay is the one way to do it, but I just fundamentally think, and I've been very public in this, that great teachers, great principals should make a heck of a lot more money than they make today. And no one enters education to make $1 million, but you shouldn't have to take a vow of poverty either. And when I go out to colleges and talk, and a lot of folks say they have a heart and a passion for education, but they can't afford it, I say, what if you were a great teacher, 30, 32, and you could make $100,000 a year? And those college kids get real quiet and sit up. That gets their attention. And what if you're a great principal and you could make $150,000, $170,000, $200,000? You pick a number. That's the best investment we can make. And where you have hard-to-staff subjects like math and science, we've had a shortage of math and science teachers for 30 years. Again, we can keep admiring the problem, or we can fix that shortage. The final thing I'll say is, again, I go back to where I started, I've yet to find a district that systemically puts their best talent in the underserved communities. And money is never going to be the reason why they do that, but it's a piece of a whole host of things. The opportunity to make a difference, the opportunity to be part of a transformative team. Those folks going to inner city urban areas or rural or Native American reservations need to have as part of their incentive package significantly more money. I was on one Native American reservation not too long ago where half their teachers come from the Philippines because they can't find a teacher from America to go work there. Something's wrong with that picture.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Secretary. It was a nice moment there. You don't usually get to give your vow of poverty talking point when there's an actual nun right in the front row. Speaks well to this audience. Thank you so much for coming, though. Thank you for taking questions, both from me and from the audience. Please join me in thanking the Secretary.
Okay.
Thank you, Secretary.
So we're running a little bit behind, so I'm going to try to speed it up here. I have to thank a couple more sponsors who were able to make this event possible. Amplify, the Doris and Donald Fisher Fund, Global Scholar, the Kern Family Foundation, Microsoft, Pearson, the Paul Singer Foundation, Target, and Susan and Bill Obendorf. So please help me thank these other sponsors that were able to make this event possible. Now, we have a 30-minute, but not quite 30-minute break. We're going to be right back here for a Common Core general session. I urge you to use this time, because it's a little bit longer than normal break, to go up and visit the expo. It may be your last opportunity to visit on the second floor. You're dismissed.